First off, find a mentor and later on try to be a mentor. So I'm
Nice.
really lucky that not only, my folks are pretty entrepreneurial, but I've had a couple of really, really great mentors going back, to high school that are a bit older, had done completely different types of businesses. But, I try to connect with for coffee once or twice a year. And that's something that's really made a lot of the difference for me.
Thanks everybody for joining this episode of The Interesting People You Meet, brought to you by Newground Financial. I'm Nathan Dover, and I got Nick Monberquette here, as well as Coltin Handrahan. He's the owner of Stay Golden, and we're super excited to have you all on, Coltin. Thank you.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me, guys. I've had the chance to check out some of the episodes here over the last couple of weeks, and I think what you guys are doing is great, and just really happy to be here.
That's awesome. I checked out the episode that you actually did. I forget the name of the podcast you were on, but I took a listen to it, and honestly, you guys talked a lot about printer stuff, and a lot of it went over my head, I'll be honest with you, but we'll get into that in a little bit here. But why don't you tell us a bit about yourself before we get started?
For sure. So my name's Coltin Handrahan. I'm a 27-year-old from Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island on Canada's East Coast. Live in Hunter River now, spend quite a bit of time in Halifax when provincial borders will allow. And our company is Stay Golden Custom. So we're a custom merchandising and printing company that builds clothing lines for brands, businesses, and teams across Eastern Canada. We do our production here on PEI, but we ship all across the Maritimes and do a lot of work in Ontario as well as all across the country. And for us, we really kind of take pride in helping our clients build entire merchandise lines and, whether it's uniforms to their staff or clothing that they're retailing to their customers. But we want to really make clothing lines for them that their staff, their team members, and their community can be really proud to wear. So that's what we do.
That's awesome. I know, like I said, just briefly before, I watched a little bit of your podcast and you kind of explained, I guess, what your favorite printers are and kind of all the stuff that goes along with that. And I'm just interested to find out, how did you enjoy your first podcast experience? I think it was just audio, right?
Yeah, so I think it was about a month and a half ago. I was featured on a podcast called Let's Get Printing, hosted by a guy named Zach Dewhurst in the States. We were chatting print stuff and recapping a trade show in Long Beach, California back in January. And Nathan, I have a feeling that this one will be a lot more kind of accessible to a wider audience because Zach and I were definitely in the weeds talking about a lot of print jargon that I could totally appreciate to the average person. It was completely boring. But very, very exciting to us print folk.
Of course.
Back in January, our production manager, Porter, and I had the chance to attend a pretty cool trade show called Impressions down in Long Beach, California. It's the biggest trade show in our industry in North America, and it was kind of the first time it had resumed since the start of COVID. So it was a pretty exciting weekend for us. It was nice to kind of get away from the very chilly East Coast winter for a little bit of California sun. Had some fun times over the weekend, and that's kind of what that podcast was a while ago. But certainly excited for this one. I think this is a bit more general, probably relatable to more people than that one, the Let's Get Printing.
That's awesome. Well, we're excited too.
Yeah, for sure. Coltin, you're 27 years old. You're a business owner. From my research, it seems as though you're doing pretty well and successful thus far. So, what made you want to start Stay Golden, or even get into the industry that you're in?
It's a great question. So we actually just celebrated our 10-year anniversary of Stay Golden Custom. Nice. Time flies, makes me feel old. But we started young. Started it as a retail clothing line with a couple of friends in my senior year of high school in 2012. Can't believe that was so long ago. I have a 10-year anniversary coming up this year with my high school grad class. And we started as this retail clothing line, and we had a lot of fun with that for a couple of years. And then we kind of slowly pivoted. When I was in college, we started getting those kind of random Facebook messages, people just asking us if we could do, say, a set of custom hoodies or T-shirts for a hockey team or, a student group. And that just kind of became this kind of side hustle that we did. It was kind of like one part of the business. And I studied marketing and advertising for 2 years at Holland College. Really enjoyed that program. And afterwards, I did corporate for about a year as a marketing director for a lobbying firm. And while I really enjoyed that, kind of took a look at this side hustle that we had kind of growing of doing this custom wholesale clothing, and decided that maybe that was really where the business was that, we could really sink our teeth into and scale. So it's probably been since 2014. That was the year that I kind of quit my corporate job, bought a bunch of printing equipment, put it in my parents' basement, did the basement thing for a while, which is a bit of a badge of honor for us. And then we moved in a garage, eventually got our own building or rented space. And then back in 2020, we actually bought our own office and production facility. So we were pretty excited about that.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. So, what was there a specific time? So like back in high school or about, when you kind of launched it, was it just like, let's do this? You mentioned it was a bit of a joke or not a joke, but just a random idea, I guess. Like, where did it come from with you and your friends?
So I think with the original launch of the company, there had actually been kind of like sports tournament at Colonel Gray where we had stepped up as sponsors and kind of around the time that we launched the company. And it was Stay Golden was something that, our kind of group of friends kind of said jokingly. It was one of our favorite kind of phrases within our kind of group. And it just kind of stuck. And it's something that I guess at that time, we didn't necessarily think that we'd be doing it 10 years later. But as kind of time went on, I mean, I guess if you do anything for 10 years and you really like it, then you're probably going to find a little bit of success with it.
Absolutely. That's a cool journey.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. And I know, like I said earlier, we don't know anything about the printers and the equipment that I guess you need to get started on something like this. And I know you probably want to nerd out a little bit here, and I'm kind of excited to hear what are the best ones. Like, what would be I guess we'll say, what equipment you have now? What did you start with, and what would be like a dream equipment for you to have?
So we kind of consider ourselves a merchandising company first and garment decorators. So screen printing is definitely one tool in our toolbox, but we actually do, we do a lot of embroidery. We do something called direct to garment printing, which is a new technology. We were the first to bring it to PEI and the second in Atlantic, Canada. So it's kind of one of those things that it kind of depends on the job. But when it comes to screen printing, there's, not to get kind of too in the weeds, but two of the bigger names in screen printing are M&R and Rock. So we're an M&R shop. And I mean, if you're going to get started on kind of a small manual screen printing press, you're probably looking between 5 and 10K if you kind of want, like, say, a 4-color. And that kind of scales to 50 to 150K when you're getting into automated screen printing. So we're pretty excited. We have a pretty big sprint coming up in terms of growth. And later this year, we're making the jump into automated screen printing. So that's something we're pretty excited about. And quite a bit of things to figure out, both on kind of the real estate and the renovation side to make that all work in the next 6 months. But it's a pretty exciting time.
Right. And you guys obviously have grown exponentially since you guys have started in the last 10 years. And the last, I would say, 5 years in particular is when I've noticed your guys' growth a lot, whether that's on social media or just kind of just word of mouth. And I saw that you guys were actually among Atlantic, Canada's top fastest growing businesses, which congratulations, obviously. And so how have you guys managed this growth?
That's a great question. So yeah, last year we were recognized as one of the Peak's top fast growing Atlantic Canadian businesses. So that was a pretty proud moment for us. It was a bit of a surprise, but we were pretty happy to see that. I think one of the things that's really helped us along the way is it's taking approach of, I guess, constant self-improvement and kind of constant learning. So it's something where we try not to get too comfortable. We're trying to push the dial forward to kind of improve our processes, improve our equipment, and improve the quality of the product that we're putting out kind of on a year-by-year basis. And another thing is kind of being like, trying to be first adopters when it comes to new technology. Like I mentioned earlier, there's something called direct-to-garment printing. We were one of the first shops on the East Coast to bring that out here. And it's something we look, and kind of after having networked with a lot of shop owners in the States and places like Colorado or New York or Los Angeles, we're looking at those industry leaders in the States and other places in Canada and kind of trying to see what things can we take from those other places to kind of raise the bar here in Atlantic, Canada.
Okay.
That's really interesting. I have a bit of a sidebar question, if that's okay. And really it's, as you've grown, some young entrepreneurs will go for seed money, some will bootstrap, some will do a combo. I mean, you own a building, you're looking to add some pretty serious machinery. So if you don't mind, can we go down the path of how you financed all of this stuff? Is it purely from sales or,
So we've actually been pretty fortunate that we bootstrapped up until this point. So awesome. I mean, not with mortgage on the building by any means.
Right.
There's definitely been some small private financing deals along the way. We were in a startup accelerator called Propel ICT back in 2015, and certainly a lot of kind of the teachings that we picked up there was to kind of steer us towards that VC route and take in external financing. We took a long, hard look at kind of what our priorities and our goals were at the time. And we kind of made the decision that, we wanted to continue to bootstrap. So we're in a pretty interesting business where we have a healthy cash flow kind of system. So we're able to, for most of our orders, it's like we're paid up front. It's like Amazon. Before we actually start producing, the customer's paying up front. So that really helps when it comes to cash flow. Absolutely. Now with this upcoming sprint we have later this year, it is going to be kind of our biggest expansion ever, probably increasing our production capacity by about 5x. So this is kind of one of the first times that we've started to seriously look at outside funding partners. And we're having some interesting conversations about that over the coming months.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So, you've seen a lot of growth over time in the size of your business. Has your team been relatively the same? You started with a few people and now you're at how many is on the squad, I guess?
So started with 2 co-founders my first year, and they were kind of around for that first year. But the last kind of, 9 years now, it's been just me kind of in ownership. And for quite a few years, it was just me running the printing press. Wow. But probably around 2015, we were able to hire our first employee, and that was a pretty big deal. And now, consistently year round, there's about 6, 7 of us. That scales up a bit during our high season. I'd say probably sometime next year, we'll be at closer to 10 consistently year round. And it's been pretty cool to kind of see the culture emerge, as you kind of have a team of 5, 6 consistently. But I think one of our goals has really been, because we're kind of so technology focused, we like to run with a relatively lean, smaller team size, and we want to empower them by technology and automation. So it's something where, our sales have, we've been on a 2x growth path for a couple of years now, but our staff size hasn't necessarily grown by 2x each year. So that's been really interesting to see.
How do you manage, sorry, Nathan, how do you manage that culture with the growth? Again, you were fortunate enough to be part of the Propel program, which I'm sure you've learned a little bit there. Maybe leaning on your folks a little bit who are entrepreneurs, but as you look at this and go, oh, wow, I got people that I'm now taking care of and responsible for, how do you approach that as a business owner?
So having a couple mentors that are quite a bit older than me, kind of in the business world, something I've come to realize is culture when you're only 5 people is pretty easy to manage. Culture when you're 10, 15, 20, that's where it gets really interesting and challenging. Right. So I have a mentor that's scaled, a business up to, I think they're about 30, 40 staff. And kind of what I've heard is it's when you kind of get into those larger numbers, that's something that, you have to actively manage that culture. We're just really fortunate and we're quite lucky that our staff gets along really well. I think we all really enjoy working here. And part of that is just, as an entrepreneur, it's like we wanted to create a place that we actually enjoyed working. Especially because, in your 20s, you're going to be clocking some pretty crazy hours. So, might as well create a place that you enjoy hanging out.
Awesome.
Nice. And obviously you said you're going to be adding a few more staff. I noticed that you guys were looking and hiring a few more people too. And what do you hope to accomplish with these new additions to your team?
So with the growth coming up later this year, there's a couple kind of components to it. So there's going to be real estate acquisition, most likely, pretty big equipment purchases. And then when that's done, there's actually probably 1 or 2 new positions created just to handle that, extra equipment. So we're actually pretty lucky. We have a gentleman who did an internship with us last summer who just finished up school. So we're creating a new position. He's going to come work for us full-time permanently. He's actually graduating this week. We had coffee there on Friday. So we're super excited to have him back. But I think it's something that as we kind of grow, it's kind of this double-edged sword because you're building production capacity when you're in our industry and merchandising. And that needs to grow at about the same pace that sales are growing, and your sales team's capacity to handle, incoming volume is growing. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. This is definitely probably our biggest push that we've ever made in one go for increasing our production capacity. It's pretty exciting though. It's I think 2022 is going to be a good year for us.
Yeah, and You mentioned earlier that you guys have been pretty much 2xing every year for the income and the sales, and oftentimes we've been hearing that COVID's been hitting businesses pretty hard, but you guys clearly not. So what have you guys done differently than some of these other businesses, and how have you adapted through COVID? And maybe even tell us a bit of some of the hard times too, because obviously not everything's perfect in a business.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. So something that was really interesting about COVID is, we saw consumer spending start to shift overall back to products from services. There's some interesting stats that I've kind of read in the past few weeks that really explain a lot of what we saw over the past 2 years. So like one thing I can certainly point to is, there's no shortage of service-based businesses in Canada that for a period of time during 2020 and 2021 couldn't actually see their customers and their users in person. So one thing, at least certainly during that first lockdown, those service-based businesses started to actually rely on products and merchandise to connect with their customers. And we create, highly customized products for businesses that can be produced here. They can be shipped anywhere Canada-wide, whether you're a coffee shop or whether you're a gym, a CrossFit gym or a brewery. That's something that, merchandise really kind of took a bigger role in 2020, especially when people weren't allowed to leave their house when they were locked down. So we had a pretty interesting program in 2020 launch. It was a fundraising kind of partnership program where we would spawn free web stores for affected businesses or musicians or nonprofit organizations. And they could sell t-shirts. We would fulfill and drop ship those to their customers. And through doing that, we were able to actually raise and donate over $10,000 to kind of local small businesses and organizations on the East Coast. So that was a pretty big highlight of the pandemic for us.
Sweet, man. That's awesome.
I'm just letting that sink in. Congrats. That's really cool.
Yeah,
Way to take a spin on a negative situation in the eyes of some people.
Yeah, no. And I mean, you also asked about kind of like, what are some of the tougher times?
Yeah.
I mean, I think any small, medium, large business owner is going to say one of the same things. It's, when March 2020 came around and the hammer dropped, and the whole world seemed like it was ending, and, you got team members that rely on kind of the business for, to put food on the table. That's, I think a lot of people would say that's probably one of the scariest life-defining moments of at least a lot of, not just millennials, every small business owner in Canada. I think on Prince Edward Island, it was pretty interesting because, the government took a pretty aggressive approach to the lockdowns. And I think there was a lot of benefit to that. We were very, very blessed that we had very low case numbers, over a 2-year period. But the flip side of that was that we were locked down for quite a bit longer than a lot of parts of Canada. We are very blessed and lucky in our industry. We were shut down for a couple of weeks and then we were able to kind of lock the doors and keep printing. Another kind of interesting spin on the pandemic for us was that we were one of the first producers of custom face masks on the East Coast. So, friends of mine down in Arizona had been very, very hot on face masks shortly after the start of the pandemic, and no one was wearing them up here. And we brought a couple thousand units of stock in, and I thought it was going to be this big thing. And we sold like 12 and had a couple thousand in stock. And I still remember that first day when our chief public health officer here went on, kind of the press conference and said that they were going to be coming in heavily recommended, and then they'd eventually become mandatory. And the phone didn't stop ringing for a week. And I think we did a recent count. Since the start of the pandemic, we've now masked 45,000 Islanders out of 160,000. Wow. So that's a pretty neat stat. Face masks, we almost formally dropped them here on PEI, I think a couple of weeks ago, but they extended it. So, March 2020 was definitely a scary time for us. I was at home for about a week and I was just going to go crazy. I need, things to do. And, I'm just used to kind of running at a pretty fast rate. So, we kind of just looked at the situation. It's like, what can we do to, I guess, help those around us that are struggling? And then, keep the lights on and, make the best of a challenging situation.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Coltin, you mentioned, your network throughout North America, by the sounds of it, in particular the US in your industry. So have you met most of these folks from going to trade conferences and that type of thing? Like how have you developed that? Because it seems pretty crucial or a big piece of how you've become successful.
It really has been in the last few years. So it would have been January 2020. I went to my first show in Long Beach, and met a lot of folks in the industry across both Canada and the States. And those have become some really, really good pals. And it's something that, regardless of industry that you're in, I think there's a lot of value. There's definitely, kind of in the local trade organizations or chamber of commerce, to meet people in your area is very valuable kind of for other reasons. But to connect with, professionals that are in your industry from other parts of North America or the world, where you have a lot in common, you face a lot of the same problems and challenges, but you're not a direct competitor by any means. So that's definitely kind of it's a different structured relationship, but there's a lot of value. And I count a lot of those people among my close friends now.
Wow, that's cool. So you did touch on it a little bit earlier, but perhaps you could get a bit more specific as far as some of the, like what I find in our industry, I do the same and Nathan does too. When we're in these conversations, even like looking at folks in the States, there's just a unique perspective. In our world and insurance, there's more legislation and stuff. So it's a little more tricky to adapt, their modalities for sales or whatever that may be. But is there one key thing that you've learned from one of those relationships that you brought back to the East Coast that hadn't really existed outside of that advanced printer that you had referred to earlier?
I don't think there's one specific thing I can point to. It's kind of, it's a long list of very, very small things that when they add up, they add up to be big things. Mm-hmm. So I kind of mentioned some of the new technology you brought in a couple of years ago. There's actually another new style of printing called direct-to-film printing that we're actively working on. And friends of ours with the shop out in Vancouver, we both run, some of the same machines. So we've retrofitted a machine with a certain driver, and we're running tests and wash tests back and forth, and just chatting on Instagram about it. So it's a long list of small things, but I think kind of networking outside the area, but in your industry, has a lot of value for that.
And that type of printer in particular, just to dig deep on that or surface level, would be, what's the difference? Does it make the piece of clothing better, or is it more efficient and effective for your use of time and just the ability to produce more? Is that, which one?
So the hack that we're trying to engineer right now would allow us to print on a wider blend of fabrics with that printer.
Okay.
Yeah. So kind of whenever we are decorating a garment, whether it's cotton, if we're getting into polyester, or perhaps it's like a Nike dry fit, all different types of fabrics kind of actually print different, and there's kind of a lot of nuance that goes on behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of an automation piece that'll help us kind of do a wider blend of fabrics.
Awesome. So as you develop the business, you mentioned you were in a few different segments, from promotional products to helping folks develop their own brands and those sorts of things. So can you dive down a little deeper on who your ideal client is, or maybe what percentage makes up what you do?
Mm-hmm. So we're primarily B2B, but we do work directly with consumers as well for bulk orders. We do a lot of work with breweries, a lot of work with cross gyms and fitness facilities. We just say really any millennial-owned small and medium-sized business. That's kind of our bread and butter. But I mean, we work with tons and tons of different types of clients, schools, teams, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But definitely kind of that, the ideal target kind of customer profile, it's typically someone in their 20s or their 30s, they're running a small to medium sized business. A lot of them are entrepreneurs or creatives themselves, and it's something, what we've come to realize is that, our generation is kind of more attuned. They don't want that classic Gildan boxy t-shirt. You probably have some of those in your closet. You were giving them at, an event for free. Maybe it was a fun run or, a volunteer t-shirt. And, we know those get kind of crumpled up and thrown at the bottom of the sock drawer. But at the same time, most of us do have a few t-shirts that we actually hang up on the hanger in the closet. And we call those our Saturday shirts, because when we go out for drinks, with our friends on the weekend, on Friday night, those are the weekend shirts. And we say at Stay Golden Custom, we're in the business of making these Saturday shirts for our clients.
That's awesome. I love that.
So I noticed you obviously said you're doing a lot of business to business right now, or B2B. And how do you get these businesses? Is it a lot of word of mouth that they're reaching out to you, or do you do any cold outreach to businesses yourself? Because I know based on the podcast that I listened to before, you said you're kind of more on the sales side of things now as opposed to the manufacturing. So are you reaching out to people, or are you just fortunate enough to have people getting referred to you and calling you guys?
So you are right. I find myself kind of on the sales side of the business now, less so than kind of on the production floor. I'd say most of our growth has actually kind of come about organically. We're really fortunate. A lot of it's been referral based. The interesting thing about, the maritime provinces in Atlantic Canada is it's a pretty tight knit ecosystem. And while a lot of people downplay us because, it's smaller than markets like Ontario, the thing is, when you combine those 4 provinces, kind of in that greater Atlantic area, that's almost 2 million people. So that's a pretty sizable market to kind of play into, but it's very interconnected. So like as an example, when it comes to those microbreweries, they talk, and it's something that we've started with a handful. Say we probably do about 12 to 15 different breweries on the East Coast now. So a lot of it is organic; it's word of mouth driven. But at the same time, we try to maintain a pretty consistent online presence, definitely social media feeds, Instagrams, where we've had a lot of success, in Google AdWords. But I wouldn't say there definitely has been points that we've done outreach, but we try to do it kind of in a more targeted fashion. If there's a specific business that we really like their stuff and that we'd like to work with, we kind of try to take a more personalized approach, rather than just like mass marketing emails or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so you're more on the sales side of things. Is there anyone else on the team that are doing on the sales side of things, or are you manning that ship by yourself?
So there's 2 of us in the sales department now.
Got it.
And that could be growing to a 3rd a little bit later on in the year. We'll see.
Nice. So how did you guys get started with this business to business idea? Because if I was to guess, at the start, you guys were probably more just creating t-shirts and clothes for like the boys and like just like friends, anyone looking for it. So what made you decide to go business? Did somebody reach out to you and it kind of was a light bulb, or? So
it's actually, we started with student groups and sports teams, but the thing is we just got older, and our clients got older too. Mm-hmm. So, perhaps the same person that we were printing dodgeball shirts for, in 2015, they're now a purchasing, agent. They're now a marketing manager at a medium-sized business. So just kind of as we grew up, our clients grew up too. It's kind of as simple as that. But PEI and the East Coast being a pretty small pond, kind of one thing leads to another. And we certainly still do lots of work with, schools and sports teams. But we've really found that over time, it's kind of those small and medium-sized businesses. That's kind of our bread and butter.
Yeah. And you just mentioned something that I was going to ask you about too. I wanted to hear about the Dodgeball PEI and how that helped accelerate your growth, because I remember when I was in high school and dodgeball was like the big thing for like 1 week of the year. And I remember always the Stay Golden shirts. That was something that always stood out to me. And I'm sure a lot of other people would have remembered that too. So how did dodgeball in particular help your guys' growth?
So we've had a lot of interesting ventures and side quests over 10 years. And one of those was called the Island Dodgeball Championship. We used to kind of play in the event space, and we did some media consulting and some fun stuff along the way over this last 10 years. And the Island Dodgeball Championship was this kind of private sports league that we hosted over a 9-year period. It had a really good run up until COVID, and it's just kind of been on pause since then, unfortunately, just because the nature of it. But it was this pretty cool event. It peaked with about 65 teams across 3 age divisions. And it would be hosted at Holland College in Charlottetown. And we'd be polling like about 1,000, 1,200 fans. Pretty cool, like Hollywood style production and smoke and lights and all that fun stuff. And we did a lot of the clothing associated with that event too. So it was a big part of, our growth, especially in the earlier years. Mm-hmm. Kind of like I said, just the way things have gone with COVID. Obviously you can't put 1,000, 1,500 people in a building right now. And it was always an event that would typically be held in January. And in both the past 2 Januaries here on PEI, we've been in either full lockdown or partial lockdown. So we're kind of, we're keeping our eye out to kind of see how things will go. Fingers crossed now as things start to reopen. Hopefully this will be it. Hopefully we'll life will get back to normal this summer, and the Roaring 20s will finally kick off.
Yeah, no, it's just funny because going back to, like I said, high school, like the first real time that I knew of Stay Golden or heard of it, it was through Dodgeball. So I thought it was pretty cool. You guys sponsoring all the jerseys. I had one myself. I probably still do somewhere.
Everyone's got a few in their closet.
Yeah,
it's a PEI thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
They wear them on Saturdays, or
it doesn't fit me anymore. But
Colton, you've done a lot of, I would assume, cool things for different businesses. Do you have a favorite project that you've worked on for a business?
We don't like to pick favorites, but there is one that stands out, and I think a lot of people on PEI could appreciate this one. It's actually a tote bag that just dropped from Rewind Vodka Seltzer, and it's a piece of art by a graphic designer named Sean Scary. And I gotta say, it's one of the coolest ones I've seen in a while. They did this, it's kind of this remix design of Rainbow Valley, which was this iconic PEI amusement park that we all grew up going to. And it probably shut down when I was in junior high. And it's kind of like a national park now out in Cavendish. But when I saw that one coming across my desk, I was like, I'm going to need one of these. It's a really cool piece of art. I think they're on sale at Upstreet and Craft Beer Corner now. And I'm just I'm hoping that we could put that one on a t-shirt too this summer.
Nice. That's cool. Even us non-islanders remember Rainbow Valley.
Yeah.
Frequented on our vacations to PEI.
Yeah,
that's cool.
It's up there with Magic Mountain for kind of iconic East Coast destinations.
You got it. Do you guys have a lot of online activity, like as far as your sales and whatnot? So if I wanted to fulfill an order, where would I go? Do I go direct to you, or can I do that through the website?
Definitely. So we've always been an online first company. So www.staygolden.ca, it's the place to find us. And that's kind of one of the reasons we were based in Charlottetown for about 5 years. But in 2020, when we actually kind of bought our own facility, we relocated to Hunter River, which is about 10, 15 minutes outside the city. And just kind of based on the real estate market, it's what was affordable for us at the time. But because we are so online based, and we ship quite a bit of product off PEI now, it really didn't make a ton of a difference if we were inside or kind of outside the city. That being said, I mean, people are always still welcome to drop by. We've got a full showroom here in Hunter River. And we do have a Charlottetown pickup location as well for local customers. But Definitely online is usually the place to find us and the easiest way to connect with us.
So you ship across Canada? It's just Canada right now, or do you guys ship to the States too?
Just Canada for now. We are working with kind of a SaaS-based solution that's going to help consolidate our shipping so we can start working into the States. That is a project for later this year.
Mm-hmm. There are a lot of rules and regulations that are different to shipping to the States versus Canada.
It's there's a lot of added challenges. Like we have shipped to the States on a few projects, but we just found in the past that the duty at the border has been pretty challenging. So it's a work in progress. We definitely we're working on a couple of solutions right now, mainly kind of tech oriented that'll help us hopefully kind of automate that and just kind of make it seamless if we're to ship over the border. So cool. Lots of interesting things it's on our long list of things to figure out later this year.
Right. What as a business owner, I have a question. This is speaking for myself, and having gone through and purchased, hats and mugs and some swag in the past, and being a millennial wanting to buy better quality material, like where does someone start? When you go like, I'm willing to pay to have some good looking stuff to represent our company. I don't want to have the bulky t-shirt that my grandfather used to wear, outside of reaching out to the website. What does that sort of process look like when someone reaches out to you guys in particular from sort of start to finish? And how do you help me customize and feel really good about what I'm purchasing?
Well, I mean, like our number one goal is to create products that you're going to love to wear. So, and that's not the classic bulky starchy t-shirt anymore. It's like, we want something that's going to fit better. It's going to be softer. It's decorated with the right print. That's not going to weigh it down. You probably have a t-shirt in your closet that feels like it's got a splotch of ink on it. Wear it on a hot day.
Sticks to your chest.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, for us, we actually kind of take more of an agency style approach when you're building out a merchandise line. So kind of one of the things that differentiates us in a lot of ways is, so we have a pretty straightforward quote request form on the site. But once we kind of get the scope of the project and kind of what the budget looks like, that's kind of where, our sales team steps in and we make recommendations, and one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is that, we kind of offer a wider range of blanks than a lot of shops kind of on the East Coast. A lot of fashion forward stuff. We're seeing a lot of trends around pigment dye stuff, tie dye, some cool denim, stuff that you wouldn't traditionally see in your local kind of town screen printing shop. Yeah. I think millennials are, and Generation Z alike are, it's like we're tuned into Instagram and social media and TikTok. And people, if they're building, a clothing line for their dance team or their CrossFit gym, it's like, their members want things that are on trend. And that traditionally, a decade or so ago, wouldn't be something that you'd find in a local screen printing shop. So for us, it's about kind of bridging that gap. It's finding things that are, fresh off the runway, a bit more fashion forward, and kind of more in tune with something like that you may see in H&M versus your classic Gildan 2000 t-shirt.
Okay. I got a question too. So how do you guys work around copyright stuff? So I was curious about this. Like if I wanted to come in and I had a picture of something that was clearly copywritten, and like, how do you guys get around that? Or is there any rules or regulations around it? Or
so, there's a couple of guidelines when it comes to something that's like explicit copyright content. Regardless of the print provider or the print shop, they shouldn't be printing that. If we are like a Nike dealer, but if someone was to come in and just like want to print a Nike swoosh, no print shop should touch that, because that comes with a lot of liability. It's something that if it's sometimes, say if it's a remix of a design, if it's for comedic purposes, there's some exceptions there. It kind of depends, but there's certainly been a lot of instances where someone like comes in with like they want Supreme printed on something, and it's like we're not doing that. It would open us up to so much liability. Okay. But I mean, it's something that like our sales team is pretty well versed on, and we can give feedback, and perhaps there's a way that could be changed. You can knock off a Supreme logo and use that box logo and put it to to say something else, to kind of communicate the message. But it's something. There are some pretty big like print on demand solutions and like say custom ink sort of thing that they try to screen that stuff with AI. We just have eyes on it because kind of for everyone's benefit, we don't want to anger any of those kind of corporate copyright folks.
Got it.
You've come quite a long way in 10 years, and you're very professional in your approach, and I'm very pleased with this conversation. This is really cool. I'm curious, what advice do you have to young millennial or Gen Z entrepreneurs? You've been through a lot of ups and downs, and you're here today. So maybe if you had 2 or 3 pieces of advice to someone considering jumping into the business world, regardless of industry.
So 2 things come to mind. First off, find a mentor, and later on try to be a mentor. So I'm really lucky that not only, my folks are pretty entrepreneurial, but I've had a couple of really, really great mentors going back, to high school that are a bit older, had done completely different types of businesses. But, I try to connect with for coffee once or twice a year. And that's something that's really made a lot of the difference for me, certainly. So that's one. And then the other thing is just, if you have an idea that you're passionate about, and you think that you have a shot at it, just get started. I think a lot of people get kind of caught up and, it's kind of that perfection trap where, it's an idea that sits and simmers and they're picking away at it, but they don't really pull the trigger on it. So ideally, it's like you're looking for something that like you could start as a side hustle first. You probably don't want to quit that full-time job right off the bat. But I would look to see, what could you start doing as kind of a side hustle sooner rather than later to get your feet wet, see if it's a fit. And then, if it's something that scales and has wheels to it, then, it's, you're in for a lot of fun.
Nice. That's great. Well, thanks so much, Coltin. I know we're pretty much getting to the end of our time here. We really appreciate you coming on. And I guess, why don't you tell the audience where they can find you or how to reach out, and if they had any questions, where they could hit you up at.
Certainly. Well, first off, guys, just want to say thanks a lot for having me on. Really enjoy this conversation as well. And what you guys are doing is great. You want to find us, we're staygolden.ca. Pretty easy to find online, or on Instagram, we're at staygoldencustom. And, if you have a merchandise project we might be able to help with, then we'd love to hear from you.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Coltin.
Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks, Coltin.